Welcome to AIADA's AutoTalk. I am Dan Barson. Today we're pleased to have Mark O'Neill, CEO of Cox Automotive Software. Prior to this, Mark was CEO of DealerTrack Technologies. DealerTrack, as many of you know, was purchased by Cox the fourth quarter of last year in a blockbuster deal. I am also pleased to introduce Cody Lusk. Cody is president of AIADA and has a distinguished career here in Washington, D.C. Before we start, let me remind everyone to stay on the line after today's conversation. Mark and Cody, welcome to the program.
Great, thanks, Dan, and thanks, Mark, for taking the time to join us today. Let's not waste any time and hop right into it. You know, I just returned from the Detroit Auto Show last week, and all the focus was on what a great year it was and what's going to be happening in 2016. But Mark, really one of the stories of 2015 was the purchase of DealerTrack by Cox Automotive, and you know, it took a lot of us by surprise. But what can you share with us today on how this came together?
Well, thanks, Cody, and thanks, Dan, for the opportunity to be with you guys today. With respect to your question, it was a long courtship. It was probably a 2 to 3 year process of us getting to know each other, making sure we had great alignment of vision and great alignment of, you know, what we could do together versus what we could do independently. And I'd say in a short sentence, the reason it came together is I think we both concluded we were better together than apart. We had a much broader suite of solutions than we ever would have had individually. And those solutions that we both represented when put together were not only very complementary, but would let us impact the industry much more significantly in a combined way than either of us could have done individually. So, you know, in short, better together and made sense together.
Right. Well, you kind of touched on a little bit of there, but what was the real vision there that drove the integration of the two of you?
Yeah, great question. So if you look at the transaction, DealerTrack's vision was to deliver the market-leading suite of integrated technologies capable of transforming auto retailing. And now, let me tell you, the Cox vision is to transform the way the world buys, sells, and owns vehicles. Very similar vision statements, you know, two key words in each of them, wanting to transform the retail auto process, you know, us through technology and Cox through not only technology, but their broad suite of solutions. So we had almost perfect alignment of vision in terms of our respective goals of transforming the industry, and that really set the stage. You add to that a lot of this very similar culture in terms of how we treated our team members and how we interacted with, you know, our dealer clients, our OEM clients, our lender clients, and all the industry participants. So, look, I think this was two companies that were meant to be together at some point, and it just took the right timing to get us together.
Well, that leads us kind of right into the next question I think that we're all contemplating as we look down the road. And just, you know, from your perspective, how do you see the retail car buying experience evolving the next 5 years? And then, you know, about the technology, you know, the role that technology is going to play in that process.
Yeah, and if I can just go back, one of the things that was touched on in the introduction was, you know, the recent Detroit Auto Show. And if you think even the week before that was the Consumer Electronics Show, I think if you reflect on the buzz around both of those shows, it was all about the connected car. It was all about technology coming into cars and the role it's going to play, whether it's autonomous driving, whether it's a more connected experience, whether it's you know, leveraging the sharing economy and the design of cars to be able to support services like Uber and Lyft and all the other sharing platforms that are really under development. There's a huge amount of technology coming into our industry, and boy, it's coming quickly. And I think, you know, as I look at that relative to the retail experience, I think giving the consumer access to technology that allows them to start, if not complete, the retail auto process on their terms and at their speed, at their pace, in a very self-directed way is one of the biggest transformations we're going to see. And I'm confident we're going to see it because we look at every other retail category, and you can think about a dominant player like Amazon, certainly, or you can think of more niche players like a Gilt or a Zappos or really almost any other retail technology platform that's come up in the last decade. Their success has been driven very much by the consumer being able to control the buying experience, having transparency into what they're getting, having the ability to complete it at their own pace. And I see that coming into our industry. I see much more transparency on pricing. I see the consumer doing most of the transaction outside of the dealership. But when I say outside, it's going to be controlled by the dealer. The parameters of pricing, the parameters of choice, the parameters of information shared are all going to be driven by the dealer. They'll just be delivered through technology as opposed to today where they're maybe predominantly delivered with people. And so I think technology will support people. I don't think people go away. I think consumers are going to want to touch cars ultimately. They're going to want to test drive them. But they're going to want that process to be linked to all the technology at the top end of the funnel for, during the research process, finding out pricing, finding out payments, finding out how to protect the car. All of that, I think, will be delivered in a very transparent, easy technology format.
Now, how does, you sort of touched on that too, but, how does our retail car dealer prepare for this technologically fragmented car buying public? And, how's your company going to help them solve those issues?
Yeah. So, look, I think one of the unique things that Cox Automotive and particularly the software group can do is deliver a more connected experience. So if you think about whether you're shopping online to find out, are you better off in a Ford or a Chrysler or a GM product? Are you better in a Toyota product, a Honda product, or a Nissan product, whatever your cross-shopping might be? We're going to help you in that part of the process, and we're going to help you because we will have more information and more capability to help you as a consumer figure out which vehicle best meets your need. And starting there, we will link that shopping process into the next part of the process, which is starting to understand affordability, understand what I'll say, the very early entry into the purchase funnel of what's it going to take to own this car, whether it's how much equity do I have in my trade, what's my monthly payment going to be versus what it is today. All of those components, by having an integrated ecosystem, we can move you from the research phase into the purchase phase very seamlessly. And from the purchase phase, we can move you physically into the dealership, or perhaps we can help you complete the purchase phase online if you're prepared to do that. Maybe you're a loyal Honda customer here, and this is your third or fourth Honda, and you don't feel you need to test drive it. You're ready to click to buy, again, through the dealership, through their website, through the, parameters that they want to serve up to that consumer if they picked a car at that particular store. We will help them execute that transaction. And if the store enables them to do it without coming in to visit, we will also support that technology. On the other hand, if the dealer wants to make sure the transaction is completed in the store because they physically want to engage with the client for compliance or other reasons, we'll enable that. The key part being that we'll never have any part of the process repeated because everything will link. So we'll know about your trade. We'll know the value we served up. We'll know the payments that we offered you from the particular financing source that were offered. So once you come into the store, none of that will ever be repeated, and that's what frustrates consumers today. They do so much work online, but then they have to repeat much of it in the store. By having a very connected process, by having a one-stop shop of technology for dealers, we'll be able to link everything together. And this isn't a future vision. Much of this will start to be delivered this year because we're well on our path to doing this. Ultimately, it will really help the dealer transform the process.
Well, let's talk about how you just kind of hit the nail on the head there as it relates to dealers, that you want to be a one-stop shop. And obviously, Cox is now has a portfolio of services that touch the dealer and the vehicle from cradle to grave. What impact is that going to have on the franchise dealer?
Yeah, I think a couple of things. I think we're going to be able to, as I touched on earlier, create much greater sense of efficiency in the retail process, and that's going to make it more enjoyable for the consumer, and it's going to make it lower cost for the dealer, which are two huge components of creating loyalty, certainly long term, is making the process enjoyable, but also because transparency does put pressure on margins, you want to figure out how to retain profitability in the dealership. And we think we can do that by, if we let the consumer be more self-service, engage in more of the process in a self-directed way, then maybe an F&I person who could only handle 40 deals in a month in a very traditional setting where everything was in store, maybe now can handle 70 or 80 or even 100 transactions a month, because they're not really presenting the whole F&I transaction. They're just helping guide a consumer that's working in a mostly self-directed way, and obviously gives you a lot of efficiency. Same's on the sales side. We can serve up a lot of information on the product in a very technology-centric way, using features like chat or even more direct, media content, whether that's reviews or specific information on the car. Again, the consumer can self-serve so that a salesperson won't necessarily have to spend their time doing that. The consumer will have empowered them. And the important part in all of this is it's self-directed by the dealer, where they will be able to tailor the technology to meet how they want to engage with the consumer. And perhaps even more importantly, not only will they be able to tailor it to the consumer, but they'll be able to tailor it to deliver a differentiated experience from a competitive dealer, so that technology can both create efficiency and it can create differentiation. And I think that's ultimately what's so important to commerce and the way, the industry works today, that it's great for the consumer because it's a very competitive environment, and we can help keep that competitiveness and that differentiation that's so important to the entrepreneurial spirit of so many of the franchise car dealers.
Now, you just said something that perked up all of our ears. You said lower cost. So what can you tell us about, there's going to be that the dealers might recognize, or are we going to see some bundled pricing on the collection of services? Can you touch on that?
Sure, terrific questions. We do anticipate doing more bundling, particularly in the software arena. And we're just starting to think about the concept. In fact, we'll go into pilot this year with a group that will test a rewards program amongst Cox more broadly, so that, maybe today you're a primary user of Manheim or AutoTrader and you don't use software very much. You might be able to earn reward points from that you can use toward software purchases. Or on the flip side, maybe you're a very heavy software user and you're not a big user of some of the media services like Trader or KVB or Manheim or NextGear or some of our other assets within Cox Automotive. Those reward points could go that way. But most importantly, if I just say, if we stay focused on software for a moment, we do envision creating packages that naturally fit together, websites and CRM, media and website services, TMS and inventory management and F&I services, that as we create greater integrations and greater workflows between those solutions, that we also create incentives to buy multiple products, because that is not only better for the dealership, it's also better for our support model and for our engagement with the dealership. So it's a win-win.
Yeah, great. And then, the question, let's say I'm not a Cox or a non-Cox service provider, is how's that going to integrate in with my other Cox services?
Yeah, terrific question. So I should have touched on this when I talked about vision. One of the very similar visions that the Cox team had and the DealerTrack team had was that as technology players, we believed in open systems. So if you think about Oracle today, Salesforce.com, any of the really, Microsoft, any of the big technology platform players, they let hundreds of other applications and services seamlessly integrate with their technology. And our belief as a technology player, and Cox's belief, was we should have open systems. The dealer's data is the dealer's data, and if the dealer wants to use a new piece of technology, particularly in this day and age where, boy, there are just so many different new technologies popping up every month, every quarter. We want to embrace those. We want to create integration schemas that allow those new technologies to be adopted by dealerships and enhance their workflow. So it is a common vision. We will allow any other technology player to integrate with any of our technology solutions. It's a very de minimis cost. We're talking, under $100 a month type costs here. And it's not only a very de minimis cost, it's very easy. If you write your code to conform with our integration protocols and you do the appropriate testing, boom, you're up and running and you're an integrated supplier, and that can often happen in weeks. Very quick, very easy, very low cost, and I think a huge benefit not only to why you should choose our platform or our technologies, because we do embrace openness, but it's a huge advantage to a dealer who wants to stay leading edge and be able to constantly try new things and adopt new technologies.
You're going to be getting a lot of data from a variety of sources, and, what is your plan on how to leverage this and improve your offerings, and ultimately what's it going to mean to dealers' profitability? I mean, it's a very, very open-ended question. I think it's on everybody's mind is what's going to happen with all this, and how are we going to use the information?
Yeah, very good question, and yes, we have an enormous amount of data. I'll put that in context. If we look at last month, between the websites that we manage on behalf of dealers, combined with the website traffic that we see from AutoTrader and KBB, we saw about 80 million auto shoppers. Now, that's just last month. That's not a whole year. So obviously, that has a lot of duplication in it. That's a lot of people who maybe visited a dealer's website, but also visited a KBB site or an AutoTrader site, or maybe visited a particular dealer's website multiple times. So there's duplication there. But even if you strip out that, and you said the number was a quarter of the 80 million, 20 million, we're talking huge amounts of customer information that we are beginning to collect and beginning to understand. And the importance of that is we think as we start to aggregate this data and we start to analyze it, we will very readily understand consumer behavior perhaps better than any other technology company in the automotive space, because we have more data by far than any other player. I mean, by multiples, whether it's 3 times, 5 times, 10 times, depending what player you look at, we are by far the largest consumer engagement company from a data side. So the object is to understand behavior, and with that behavior, help a dealer serve up, or an OEM, more targeted offers. Maybe we only show them one particular lending option versus 3 or 4 because we understand their behavior enough to know that this is the best option for them. Maybe instead of serving up 4 aftermarket products, we only serve up 2 because we understand their propensity to buy, we understand their behavior, and so we serve up the 2 most likely products to be purchased. Maybe we understand that this consumer is more of a lessor than a retail finance customer, again, from prior behavior, from their activity that we monitor them jumping to all these different websites and engaging online. And so we take all this data and we build models. And our vision for this is that we watch a consumer's behavior online. Based on that behavior, we compare it to models that we build that say this behavior suggests this type of likely transaction. And then we serve up offers that are very relevant and very pertinent and very personally targeted. They might even be different incentive offers. One customer may need an incentive to take a test drive, and the other may need an incentive for financing. But you don't want to do both because they won't both be equally effective. So, again, using this data to serve up targeted offers to get the consumer to purchase the car that will fit their needs the best with the financing and all the products that will most apply to that particular consumer and their life cycle of ownership. And, oh, by the way, then when the purchase is complete, continue to use that data to help the consumer engage with the dealer so they stay through the ownership life cycle. I think it's enormously powerful. And it's pretty clear that OEMs, dealers, lenders, other partners are beginning to realize the amount of data we have and are starting to engage with us. to work in a way that we can work collaboratively to use this data to everyone's advantage in the purchase process. So stay tuned. We're collecting lots of it now. We're starting some very targeted tests, and over the next couple of years, I think we'll demonstrate to the industry that we are the single best player to engage with in terms of understanding consumer behavior, because we understand it better, because we have more data and we have better analytics than anyone in terms of parsing that data to be able to use it to make a more efficient purchase process.
Yeah, well, based upon what you've said thus far and explained all that Cox Auto is providing, I have to ask, do you feel that you have any gaps or anything that you're providing? I mean, share any light on any future, purchases, holes that you might fill? I mean, I find it hard to believe, but I mean, from your perspective, always evolving, what are you looking for out there?
Yeah. At this stage of the game, I would say there are no holes in the offering. Certainly nothing substantive. You said, well, what about CRM? What about websites? What about DMS? What about any of the big holes have been completely plugged, and we have a terrific offerings. And really, as the autonomous vehicle evolves more, there may be new technologies that are more appropriate for us to acquire than to build ourselves. On the same hand, we are staying very close to OEMs. We had an OEM approach us recently saying that they wanted to sit down and talk about a 5 to 10-year plan in technology. They wanted to share with us their vision for technology and figure out how we could work together to deliver things like maybe a virtual test drive, a much more autonomous or self-directed purchase process within a store environment. How could we use touch screens and technology within stores to make it a more engaging experience? And so I think for the most part, the OEMs are going to have us on their radar and involve us way ahead of how they would have traditionally involved us, which is very much after the fact. Now we're going to get ahead of the game with them. And I think that's going to help us close any gaps by planning in advance and starting to build technology. But should we miss anything particular, or if a new piece of technology pops up that we think is very exciting, the nice part is Cox has a terrific balance sheet, enormous resources. They think very long term in terms of 5, 10, 15-year plans. And I think they'll give us the capability to acquire anything that we think makes sense to the portfolio that we don't have today.
Oh, well, let's go to the flip side of that, Mark, where there was some platform or service duplication. How did you decide which companies to keep? Let's say, for example, you kept VAuto and spun off AAX and Inventory Plus. How are you prioritizing integrating all the various services?
Yeah, well, specifically on VAuto and Inventory Plus, we were more mandated of how that was going to ultimately happen. Obviously, we had to divest Inventory Plus to complete this deal. So that was a bit of a unique situation, and one really driven by external variables more than internal. On the flip side, things like VIN Solutions had a website platform, and we had a website platform. We've already made the decision to use the existing platform we had, and we made that choice for two reasons. We thought the technology was more scalable, and we had a much larger install base of the Dealer.com solution than we did the VIN Solutions website platform. So we formed a team, and that team came to this conclusion, and it was formed by folks both from the traditional Cox software team as well as the DealerTrack team. And look, that's how we're approaching all of these. We have a digital retailing suite, and Cox had a suite called Make My Deal. We have multiple CRM solutions. And so we formed teams around all of this to say, look, we want you guys, and these are interdisciplinary teams from both the existing Cox organization as well as the new DealerTrack organization, and we're empowering them to sit down, look at the technologies, look at the long-term vision of an integrated software platform, and figure out which solution is the best one. In some cases, it'll be one versus the other. In some cases, it might be a new best-in-class platform. But it's very collaborative. And we're working very quickly in this area. So we've obviously, the decision was made on Inventory Plus. The decision's already been made on websites. We anticipate a CRM decision in the first quarter of this year. We anticipate a decision in the fixed ops area between ASR Pro and we're now called Service Pro and Xtime, also in the first quarter. So we're working quickly to make sure there's no ambiguity with our client base out there, and that indeed we're taking the time to look at best in class and be very objective in how we choose which is the right platform for the long term here for both ourselves and our clients.
Great, Mark. Hey, Mark, we did get one question from the audience. Do you mind if we go ahead and take it? We have a minute.
Not at all. Sure.
Do you think Google is a peer competitor or challenger in matching Cox's understanding of consumer behavior? That's a great question.
It is a great question, and I think it is one of the huge opportunities ahead of both of us. And I think we have much more auto shopping consumer information than Google has, and we have it much deeper. On the other hand, Google has enormous analytics strengths. So I think there might be an opportunity here for partnership, for collaboration. You know, if you think of our 80 million auto shoppers that I referred to between our various websites and our various platforms, you know, I think we dwarf the auto shopping traffic that Google has. That said, they are very strong analytically, and I think both of us would like to ultimately figure out something called attribution.
What do you mean by that, Mark? Attribution?
The holy grail in media. It is the ability to understand when you spend $1 in advertising, let's assume it's all digital advertising now, what happens on the transaction side? How effective was that dollar spent? Well, if you think about those 80 million consumer behaviors, we also have about 3/4 of all of the transactions that are happening real time in North America we have information on, maybe because we helped do the financing, maybe we did the title work on that car, maybe we did the registration work, whatever it might be, we have about 3/4 of the transaction data real time. So we have almost all the consumer data, we think 90% plus of it, 75% of the transaction data. If you can link those two, you can create attribution. And if you create attribution, it's a win for Google in terms of optimizing ad spend, and it's a win for us in terms of delivery of a unbelievably optimized media and ad platform for the dealer. So I anticipate lots of collaboration with Google in the next year or two ahead, and us really being able to make a big impact in the industry.
Mark, Cody and I really want to thank you for your time this morning. We know you're very busy, still doing a lot of work and probably running back and forth to Atlanta, trying to integrate the two organizations. So we really sincerely thank you. Thank you for your time and sharing your vision and your knowledge. We really appreciate it.
Thanks, Dan. Thanks, Cody. It was a pleasure to be with you guys this morning. I appreciate the opportunity as well.
Next month, we are pleased to have Zane Hack. He's with Shell Oil, General Manager, Fuel Pricing and Demand Management. And with the average fuel price or gas price running around $2 a gallon, we're wondering what can we expect for 2016. And we're going to have Shell on the line next month to talk about supply, talk about pricing, and talk about what we can expect as we go through the year. Please join us. That'll be on February the 16th at 10 a.m. We will repeat that again at 4 p.m. That's Eastern Standard Time. Make sure if you want to go back and listen to predictions on 2016, please go back to AIADA.org. That was our December program, outstanding material that was presented. And if you go under News and Events and past programs, that's there for you to listen and access. We had a tremendous panel that shared their visions on what to expect for 2016. Please make plans, if you're going to NADA, to join us for our annual luncheon. That'll be held on Sunday at 11:30 at the Westgate Hotel, which is tied right to the convention center. So please plan on joining us. Again, thank you very much for your time, and we look forward to seeing you and hearing from you all next month in February on the 16th. So again, everybody, thank you very much for your time this morning. Thank you.